The Wars for Armageddon are a trilogy of brutal conflicts on the Imperial hive world of Armageddon, facing inquisitors, Astra Militarum regiments, and Space Marine chapters against Orks and Chaos foes. The tumultuous conflicts have seen the rise and fall of heroes, warlords, and daemons. Today, we're going to be looking at the Second War for Armageddon, a desperate struggle between the Imperium of Man and the Ork warlord Ghazghkull Thraka. Although the official beginning of the conflict was in the year 941 M41, the events that led to the Second War for Armageddon really began 9 years prior. This story begins on the planet of Urk. The planet, originally called Urokleas, was conquered by the Dark Angel's Legion in M31. The Imperium began mining the resources of the planet, eventually building hive cities. In M32, one of the largest Greenskin Waaaghs in the Imperium's history swept through the system, annihilating all life on the planet. Orks infested the planet, renaming it Urk. In the twistings of the Imperium, the warp began to be turbulent around the star system Urk inhabited, causing warp travel to be impossible, stranding Orks on the planet. For 8,000 years, the Orks stranded on the planet waged constant war on each other, forming into tribes in constant conflict. No clear warlord rose up on the planet until shortly before the Second War for Armageddon. As the tides of the warp moved again, travel became possible in the system. Fearing an imminent Ork war launching from the planet, an undisclosed Space Marine chapter attacked the planet in an attempt to slaughter the Orks. Whilst in a gunfight, an Ork boy named Ghazghkull Thraka received a bolter wound to the head. Luckily, or unluckily, for Ghazghkull, he was found by a pain boy named Mad Dok Grotsnik. As often happens with pain boys, Grotsnik went a little freestyle with his repairs on Ghazghkull, implanting a bionic device inside the head of Ghazghkull, replacing a large amount of his cranium. Here's where two things could have happened. This bionic implant made the Ork insane, giving him a messiah complex and delusions of visions sent from Warhammer. Or, this bionic implant activated a latent psychic ability, allowing Ghazghkull to commune and get visions from Warhammer. Whichever it is, you decide. Over the next 6 years, Ghazghkull rose up the chaotic power ladder of the Orks, eventually becoming the war boss of his tribe. Almost as if Warhammer were waiting for their prophet to rise to power, the Orks were presented with the key to leaving Urk. Foreshadowed by turmoil in the warp and solar flares hitting the scrap planet, a huge space hulk emerged from the Imperium. Ghazghkull, using both intimidation and persuasion, convinced the other 4 Ork tribes on the planet to unite under him and join forces for a great war. The Orks, harnessing their innate ability to crudely modify and manipulate technology, boarded the Space Hulk, using the massive hulk as a warp-capable spacecraft. With the full might of Ghazghkull on board, the Space Hulk launched into the warp, heading directly for Armageddon. En route to the planet, the Geloff field failed. The barrier keeping the denizens of the warp at bay opened like a floodgate, invading the Space Hulk. Ghazghkull's boys, bored from the relatively relaxed and safe space travel, took to arms eagerly, enjoying this mid-flight entertainment. Ghazghkull, showing great intelligence for an Ork, saw this as a great opportunity to give his boys vital experience. The arrival of the Space Hulk did not come without warning. Beginning as faint whispers in the warp, astropaths began to hear the eager shouts of the incoming Ork boys. The Ork Space Hulk exited the warp on the outer edge of the system. Upon entry to the system, the Orks destroyed the Imperial defence platforms, satellites, and any Imperial strike craft that dared range close to the Space Hulk. Armageddon sent out desperate calls for reinforcements to the wider Imperium, calling for any aid available. 3 Space Marine chapters began to organise themselves into a strike force to aid the defence of the hive world, but unfortunately would not be able to reach Armageddon before the start of the Ork invasion. 1 solar month after entering the Armageddon system, the Orks began their invasion, hurtling their Space Hulk into the planet. The orbital defences were useless against the giant Hulk, as it made planetfall. To the dismay of the Imperial defenders, a huge warp storm erupted around the system, preventing Imperial reinforcements reaching Armageddon. The defenders of the planet were alone for the foreseeable future. Although the warnings through the warp and through the Emperor's tarot were clear an invasion was imminent, the planetary governor chose to ignore these warnings, causing Armageddon to be relatively unprepared for the invasion. The only reason any distress signal was sent out to the wider Imperium was due to the foresight and good judgment of Commissar Yarrick. However, due to these actions, Commissar Yarrick was banished to a hive named Hades on the subcontinent of Armageddon Secundus, forced into leaving the command of the planet's defence to the planetary governor von Straub. Von Straub, deploying the planetary defence force in defensive rings around Armageddon's hive cities, drastically underestimated the threat of the Orks, believing the PDF troops outmatched the Orks. When landing on the planet, the Orks split into 5 tribes, targeting different parts of the planet. The Greenskins fell on the hive cities in fierce attacks, easily pushing back the PDF troops. It quickly became clear that the northern hemisphere of the planet would fall to the Orks, forcing von Straub to relocate his command centre to Hive Tartarus in Armageddon Secundus. At this point, 3 of the 5 Ork tribes were unaccounted for, with von Straub believing that these were being kept in reserve by the Greenskin warlord. Von Straub was advised to prepare for an attack from these missing tribes. Princeps Prime Curtis Mannheim, the leader of the Titan Legion stationed on Armageddon, implored von Straub to reconsider his strategy, predicting an imminent attack from these missing tribes. Believing they remained held in reserve, and that they would never be able to cross the equatorial jungle region of the planet at the centre of the peninsula that separated Armageddon Prime from Armageddon Secundus, von Straub intended to launch a mighty counterattack, leading from the fore and reaping the glory. Following the Princeps Prime's predictions, the Orks invaded Armageddon Secundus, alongside the hostile weather of Armageddon's Season of the Storms. Where volcanic activity and giant storms ravaged the planet, the Orks unleashed massive armoured columns on the hive cities. 2 of the tribes headed directly to Hive Hades, where Commissar Yarrick still occupied. The Princeps Prime then advised von Straub to deploy the Titans in a defensive action, holding their current territory. But following the trend of ineptitude we see from von Straub, the governor ignored this advice and deployed the Titans in a counter-attack. The giant walking fortresses strode forth to challenge the Orks, facing down the unprecedented Ork numbers and their perverted version of Titans, their Gargants. The Titans and Gargants launched into fierce and desperate fighting. The Titans, more experienced in Titanic combat, took the upper hand early, winning the first few Titanic duels. But the sheer number of the Orks Titans soon swung the dynamic of the battle in the Greenskins' favour. Realising the Titan Legion was facing defeat, Mannheim led his Titans in a last charge against the Orks. Facing down a host of Gargants and 6 million Orks, Mannheim's Titan took critical damage during a duel with a particularly effective Gargant. After winning the duel, Mannheim set his Titan to self-destruct, destroying many Gargants and halting the Ork offensive. Without the godly power of the Titan Legion, von Straub quickly realised how vulnerable they were, ordering all forces to pull back and form defensive lines against the Styges and Diabolus rivers. With the Season of the Storms abating, more Ork mechanised units moved south. The new Ork offensive quickly overwhelmed the defensive lines, pushing back Imperial forces further, and sweeping into Hive Infernus. Demoralised by the constant defeat, the leadership of Hive Infernus surrendered to the Orks without a fight. Those not captured by the Orks fled in huge refugee columns across the deserts of Armageddon, facing the harsh elements. The refugees were also harassed by Ork speed freaks, herding the helpless refugees back to the Hive to suffer the brutal fate of Ork enslavement. Soon, the Ork invasion led them to Hive Hades. Commissar Yarrick had taken over control of the Hive. Compared to the other hives, Yarrick organised the Hive far more effectively in preparation for the siege. Showing his tactical acumen, the Commissar readied the hive walls for the siege, wielding the blast portals of the city shut. He also negotiated a deal with the many hive gangs of the city, forming a ragtag but effective defensive army. The Orks laid siege to the city, impatiently waiting for their gargants to breach the city gates and walls, while the citizens of Hive Hades survived on minimal power and eating processed rats and insects. Von Straub would finally unleash his hidden arsenal. His ancestors, the first colonisers of Armageddon, had stashed away missiles armed with the Life Eater virus, an extremely potent Imperial biological weapon of mass destruction. Loaded on archaic missile systems, Von Straub ordered them to strike directly into the Ork horde. Whether through bad luck, delusion, or a mixture of both, this plan by Von Straub again went awry. In the long time since the arsenal was first stashed away, the Life Eater virus had lost a large amount of its potency. When they struck the Ork horde, the Life Eater virus still dealt casualties, but nowhere near enough to halt the overall Ork invasion. To the west of Armageddon Secundus, the thriving city of Hellsreach were inspired by Commissar Yarrick and the defence of Hades, putting forth formidable resistance against the Ork besiegers. Following the example of Yarrick, Hellsreach officers organised an irregular fighting force composed of PDF and street gangs. On the outskirts of the Hive, the street gangs enacted guerrilla warfare, ambushing the Orks in the tight streets and alleyways. While the street gangs held off the Orks, non-combatants were evacuated through oil supertankers across the Tempest Oceans through Hellsreach's vast dock network. Despite a huge portion of the population escaping the Battle of Hellsreach, thousands of citizens remained, seeing that if the city fell, they'd be enslaved and slaughtered. The remaining citizens took up improvised weaponry and aided in the defence of the city. Many of these citizens, desperate to aid the city's defence, tragically decided to take their own lives in explosive suicide bombing waves. Drivers of construction vehicles and cargo cranes used their vehicles to battle with the Ork gargants. The resistance from Hellsreach pushed the Orks back time and again. Although in true fashion, the Ork boys were enjoying the good fight, the warlords, however, questioned if taking the city was even worth it. The warlords, desperate to overrun the defenders and break the deadlock, brought forth their weird boys and their psychic might. In a catastrophic attack, the weird boys destroyed the minds of all humans inside of Hellsreach, leaving the city open to conquest. Back over in Hive Hades, the Orks still laid siege on the city, still unsuccessful in breaching the walls of the Hive. Ghazghkull himself came to personally lead the siege. Following the whispers of the Ork gods, Ghazghkull tried different strategies to break the city. From modified gargants, aerial drops of Ork commandos, and insanely powerful siege weaponry, Ghazghkull unleashed his full power on the city. For every new tactic used, Commissar Yarrick adapted the defences and repelled the attacks. From enlisting maintenance staff to ambush commando units, to suicide bombers destroying the Greenskin siege equipment, Yarrick showcased tactical brilliance in the defence of Hades, ever frustrating the Ork leader. As the siege of Hades waged on, with Ghazghkull inventing more mad and insane ways to breach the walls, the rest of the planet's fate balanced on a knife edge. After the fall of Hellsreach, the Orks surged south, heading for Hive Archeon, one of the last remaining bastions of human defence. With Von Straub hidden in his bunker, resigned to the fall of the planet, the Hive governor was on his own in the defence of the city. As the Orks launched their assaults, the outer Hive quickly fell to the charge. The defenders of the Hive quickly retreated to the centre, adamant to hold it or die trying. The Orks, hungry for a taste of victory and bloodshed, amassed for one final charge into the city. With shouts and snarls, the Orks charged with everything they had, using every vehicle and gargant at their disposal to decimate the last defenders. The PDF of Hive Archeon dug in and prepared themselves for their doom, watching the vicious beasts charge ever closer. But suddenly, explosions smashed into the charging Orks, Imperial aircraft filled the skies, Thunderhawk gunships soared overhead. Drop pods hurtled into the Orks, and the roar of bolter fire near deafened the defenders. Imperial reinforcements had arrived in the form of the Emperor's Angels of Death. The Astartes had come. The Orks were pushed out of the hive, and for the first time in the Second War for Armageddon, the Orks tasted defeat. To the process of von Straub, the Space Marines took command of the defence of Armageddon, with Commander Lucius Dante, hero of the Blood Angels chapter, taking command personally. Dante ordered von Straub to be put under house arrest and await trial for negligence, assassination and murder. Von Straub took to a land speeder to escape the retribution of the Astartes, but like all of his plans, this failed and the land speeder was found wrecked. However, his body was never recovered. The siege of Hive Hades still continued, with more Orks flocking to Ghazghkull to try and take the city. With the duration of the siege lasting so long, even the desperate food sources of rodents and insects grew scarce. The inhabitants of Hades gained a feeling of impending doom and dread that no number of speeches or rhetoric from Yarick could abate. In a desperate gamble to cut the head off the Ork Waaagh, Dante ordered a surgical strike on the Ork headquarters, a strike directly on Ghazghkull himself. The Blood Angels stormed the headquarters, cutting down the elite guards hunting for Ghazghkull. In a turn of fate, Ghazghkull was touring the front lines during this tactical strike, and was miles away from his headquarters. However, the strike wasn't all to waste. The insurgents still managed to kill Ork boys and leaders, effectively halting an Ork spearhead. Outside of skirmish warfare, the next large-scale battle began when Imperial forces attempted to retake Hive Tartarus. The streets of the Hive would bear witness to some of the bloodiest fighting in the war. Orks and Imperial forces would fight over every inch of the Hive, with occasional Space Marine strikes to the backlines of the Orks. Although the fighting was incredibly fierce, it wasn't strength of arm or tactical acumen that would create a victor. It was a lack of logistics and organisation that would be the Orks' downfall. The Orks, in their enthusiasm, expended all their ammo quickly, having to resort to hand-to-hand combat and stone projectiles. The Orks were slaughtered, with almost half of the entire Greenskins in Armageddon being killed. Another detrimental factor to the Ork invasion was the apparent death of their leader, Ghazghkull. Rumours abound of the Ork war boss being hit in his bionic implant, which spread like wildfire through the Ork ranks, being bolstered by Ghazghkull not being seen. For all intents and purposes, this signalled the end of any real greenskin resistance on the planet. The surviving Orks on the south of the equator fled into the jungles, devolving into feral Orks. Eventually, an Imperial relief force was sent north to aid Hive Hades, with contingents from the Astartes chapters, Blood Angels, Ultramarines and Salamanders leading the charge. With the warp storms abating, more Astartes chapters had begun to arrive. To the dismay of Imperial command, the Orks had finally managed to breach the walls of Hades. The relief force, after defeating the Orks, discovered only small pockets of human resistance left. Remarkably, an Astartes squad found a bloody and unconscious Commissar Yorick, surrounded by a pile of Ork corpses. In a last-ditch attack, the Orks rallied in the west and began a spearhead to retake Hive Tartarus. The new offensive succeeded in pushing past Imperial defensive positions along the Skeletus River. Their early momentum soon slowed as the combined efforts by Astartes forces pushed back the Orks. During this attack, the Astartes discovered a shocking truth. The Orks had rallied around a war boss, but not a new Ork leader. Ghazghkull Thraka had seemingly returned. After taking serious losses, the Orks finally admitted defeat and fled the planet in the year 961 M41, with Ghazghkull cursing the name Commissar Yarick and demanding a rematch. A cool little anecdote from this war was the war in the north was largely won by a mercenary group of the Leagues of Votan, led by Inquisitor Horst of the Ordo Xenos. Thanks for joining me today, guys. I've been busy recently with training for an upcoming fight, but I've got some more free time now to continue making you some content. Let me know what you think of today's video, and leave a like and comment if you enjoyed it. Also, let me know what you think I should cover next. Thanks for watching guys, I'll see you all in a bit.